Joe, in your residential land price index for China, you're finding that a number of cities in China are having high land price growth and improving land price growth, though that is not true everywhere in China. What are the implications of this for the Chinese economy, which, as you know, is slowing?
One of the reasons it's slowing is the property markets are slowing off the East Coast. Outside of the major East Coast cities, a number of property markets are slowing. So the real estate markets themselves are impacting the growth. It's not just the growth is impacting the real estate. And the reason is China's a developing country, so building and construction is a far bigger share of their national economy than it is in the U.S. It's a far bigger share than it was at the peak of our housing boom last time. In China, commercial and residential housing, which they don't break out in their data, is well over 10% of national output. At our peak in the U.S., it got to about 6%. So both factors work, and they work, to the deterioration of some property markets, I think. Slowing real estate affects the economy. That causes less job growth, less demand for housing. That feeds back into the property markets, which then feedback. And the Chinese government worries about this and has introduced a number of policies to try to break that link.
One possible thing I can imagine the Chinese government doing is selling more land to spur more construction to spur the economy. Do you see that as something that they might do?
That's a local government decision. Okay. So each local government owns its own land in the Chinese market. What we see is a general slowing of purchasing by private developers. Relative to 2 years ago, the number of parcels sold in the 35 markets that we track in our index is roughly half of what it was 2 years ago. And over the last 3 quarters, the number of land parcels sold to private developers in these cities is back to financial crisis levels that we saw in 2008 and the like. So you do not see much evidence that they're not ratcheting down production. But I don't think it's the local government that's doing it. I think what's driving it is private builder demand has fallen. They see the slowing in the markets outside of Beijing and the like, and they just don't need as much land going forward.
So one thing that you have found in your land price index is that some cities, such as Beijing, are growing tremendously. Others are declining. Is China as exposed to a property market decline in terms of its economy as, say, the U.S. was at the peak of its last housing boom in the mid-2000s?
In one sense, yes, but in a more important sense, no. The one sense in which it is heavily exposed is that new construction is a very big part of its economy. That direct effect will be important, and it causes big spillovers on the demand for many, many commodities and materials, steel, lumber, etc., anything that's used in housing production. In a second sense, though, I do not believe there'll be a fallout anything like you saw in the United States, and that's because Chinese home purchasers are not nearly as highly leveraged as Americans were at the height of our boom. There's a lot of equity at the household level. So if prices fall, there's no reason for those people to default. Now, what that will do to the Chinese economy is what it would do to any economy. If your household or my household loses a lot of its equity wealth in housing, we're going to restructure our household balance sheets. We're going to slow consumption growth, start saving more, and that's going to spill over. And if we all try to do that at the same time in the economy, we understand the fallacy of composition argument that Paul Samuelson made a long time ago, which is it'll slow the overall economy. So I think it is important. It will affect economic growth directly, but I do not believe you are going to see some massive financial collapse because of over leverage. It won't be like what happened in the United States at all, I think.